Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Key Ingredient Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Rob Mack. Rob is a celebrity happiness coach, a positive psychology expert, a published author, a TV host and producer, and very importantly, a dear friend. Rob, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Man, I love the intro.
I know there's a lot more. Listen, you've been endorsed by Oprah. You're a well-educated guy. You're on Access Hollywood. I know you've appeared on there many times. So you've done a lot of things, and we could get to all that. But maybe actually on that note, if you don't mind, maybe just tell our listeners and viewers just a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Boy, that's a big question. I just am a guy who's obsessed with happiness, honestly. I love seeing people happy. I love being happy. And I'm obsessed with the science of happiness, like what leads to it, what it leads to, right? So lots of research and, particularly the last 25 years, lots of research and studies been done around, what happiness is and what it leads to. It's pretty surprising. A lot of stuff's pretty surprising. So mostly I am just a person who loves happiness. I got there through the long, indirect, scenic path because I was a pretty unhappy kid.
Okay.
But yeah, just a guy really is obsessed with happiness.
Right. So you grew up in L.A., right?
Or you grew up in Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
then
Yeah.
you lived in L.A. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, L.A. did, school hard knocks in L.A., so it felt like I grew up there, that's for sure.
Yeah. So how long have you actually been practicing?
20 years.
20 years, okay.
Yeah.
So what led to you wanting to be a happiness expert?
Yeah, unhappiness.
Unhappiness.
Oh,
Okay,
man,
cool. Great answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
truly. My first memories in life were ones of being deeply unhappy and depressed. And I always thought I'd grow out of it, Maybe I was 6 or 7 years old, and I just remember being, just like self-loathing, self-hating, and nothing seemed to satisfy me. I was always anxious. And I just assumed one day I probably will get happy. Everybody else seems fine. Most adults, they don't seem that happy, but they seem happier than me. So, I did pretty well in school. I did pretty well in sports. And I even made some friends. Eventually I had a girlfriend. I never accomplished my dream of being a professional basketball player.
Okay.
But despite what I accomplished or even acquired, I just continued to feel worse. And I got to a place where I was so seriously depressed and so seriously suicidal that I decided to do some research. And so I researched ways to kill myself. And eventually one day I decided I was going to slit my wrist. So I just went into the kitchen, I got a steak knife, and I dug into my wrist. Can't quite see it underneath the watch.
Yeah, sure.
Test marks are still there. And in that moment, I had the strangest experience, Stefan. I felt the kind of peace and joy and even love that I'd always hoped to experience, but I experienced at what I'd consider one of the lowest points in my life, like right when I'm digging this knife in. So when I felt that, I was like, I'm going to postpone this suicide thing, for a little while. At the time, it was like 10 minutes. I'll postpone it for 10 minutes, which is now very laughable, right? But in that 10 minutes, I decided to start doing a different kind of research. Like, what is depression really? What is happiness? And what is unhappiness? And I was surprised. So that 10 minutes turned into a few days, a few weeks, and now it's been, well over 20 some years.
Wow.
And,
How old were you at that time?
Oh,
roughly.
Well, I was 6 or 7 when I first began to feel the stress, anxiety, the unhappiness. And at that point, when I made the suicidal sort of attempt, it was probably in my early 20s.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Early to mid 20s.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Course.
It's interesting. One thing you said that sticks out from that was that everybody else seemed happy,
Yeah.
right? Or seems happy. Are they?
No. Definitely not.
Yeah, they're
Definitely
not.
No.
They're not.
No.
There are people listening and watching right now hearing your story, right? That could totally relate to this. So I think it was very important that you shared that. There's a saying, and I think you and I have, over one of our coffee meetings, have discussed this, but one of my favorite sayings is that we're in the best position to help the person we used to be. And your story, I think, just said that exactly. So let's dig a little deeper here. So okay, so you were fortunate. You got to a good place. You went to college. What happened after that?
Yeah. So I read as much as I could about happiness. From the greatest minds I could possibly find. And I would even ask everyday people that I worked with or knew, why are you so happy? What is it that makes you so happy? And I was, on one hand, quite surprised by how little self-awareness lots of people had around what made them happy. On the other hand, I was quite impressed and inspired by the number of people who had experienced unhappiness in some form or fashion, but had found a way to become happier. And then I was probably even more impressed and inspired by the entire field of positive psychology that really is the science of what makes life worth living, like the science of happiness.
Interesting.
So yeah, I began to really research and then apply everything I could to become happier, and I would track it. So the stuff that was working, I'd keep doing, and the stuff that wasn't working, I'd get rid of. But it was lots of like fits and starts, right? So it'd be like 2 steps forward, 1,000 steps backward.
Sure.
I was convinced none of it was working ever, pretty much. But then one day I remember waking up, and suddenly I wasn't suicidal. Like I hadn't thought about suicide for like at least a day or two. And that hit me hard. I was like, wow, that's interesting. I'm used to experiencing suicidal ideation like dozens of times a day. It was the foremost predominant thought in my brain ever at that age. So yeah. And then at some point in time, as I got happier and happier, I decided I needed to make a career out of it. Both on one hand, because I wanted to help people who, as you said, were like me, and were struggling. On the other, I felt that I needed it in order to stay focused and committed to my own happiness.
So you help yourself while helping others.
Yeah, like, I was quite aware that by talking to other people about it all day, every day, I'd have to live it. I couldn't get away with just having conversation here and there. No, it's like every day or every week I see this client, I'm going to need to live it. And I needed that kind of accountability to stay on track, I felt.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So, I think a lot of us, when we equate happiness, we think of success, right? Someone's successful, they must be happy. Although, unfortunately, I think we could go through a lot of stories of very well-known celebrities, comedians, that appear to have everything and they're not happy. So is success, does it really lead to happiness?
No, definitely not. That's, to your point, that's why I even have a job. And trust me, I'd love to be put out of a job by everybody getting happy, particularly folks that are, doing well in other ways. But no, the science is crystal clear about that. Success doesn't guarantee happiness. And in fact, the relationship is in the other direction. The happier you are, the more success you tend to experience in all life domains. So, happy people live longer, about 6 to 7 years longer, sometimes as many as 11 years or more than their unhappy counterparts. They get married earlier, stay married longer, and are happier in all the relationships, whether they're married or not. It's not really about marriage. Right. It's not about that relationship. It's about happiness and love. They experience better health as they live longer. They're actually rated as more attractive than their unhappy peers. So,
interesting.
Yeah, if you take a picture of yourself when you're not feeling so great, you're not smiling, and you compare it to a picture of yourself where you are smiling and you're genuinely demonstrating what we call Duchenne smile. It's a smile that activates about 300 muscles in your face. You cannot fake it. People will consistently rate that guy who is smiling as more attractive than the guy who's unhappy, right? So everything else being equal, happiness makes you more attractive. And I say that both literally and figuratively because it attracts other people, but it also attracts better opportunities, better health, right? More love, more money. Right. So happy people tend to make more money over the course of their life. So they make about $600,000 to $700,000 more on average than their unhappy friends and unhappy strangers and colleagues. So happiness is a cheat code and a master key to success. So yes, the way I often put it, happiness is the greatest success, but it also leads to success.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most of us intellectually might understand that, but we don't live our lives that way often, right?
That's the complete opposite of what I think most people think, right?
Yeah.
So essentially what you're saying is being happy could potentially increase your chances of being successful in whatever we want to define success as.
It will definitely increase your chances of being successful. I mean, think about it in very simple ways, right? So if you're a salesperson and, in order to be happy, you have to have a pretty resilient mindset.
Yes.
Right? You can't let external circumstances, conditions, or a no from a customer affect your mood too much, because you're going to go to the next client or customer and take that mood with you. And nobody wants a nasty, unhappy person around. They don't want to buy from that person. Also, if you're feeling really down, you're not going to be motivated to go to the next person. You're going to give up, right? So you can see how improving your subjective well-being, becoming happier and more emotionally regulated, can improve not only the way in which you relate to other people, but the way in which they relate to you, and also how much you persist how much patience you have, your resilience. All those things are directly correlated with success.
It's interesting. So when you said that, the first thing I think of is I think of confident people, right?
Yes.
People who can handle rejection very easily. Those are confident people. But then I'm also thinking being happy could lead to confidence then based on that.
Yeah.
Is that true or not necessarily?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's a great point that you're making, which is like, what's the difference between happiness and confidence?
Yeah.
I'd say that most people will experience happiness as confidence, right?
Yeah.
Not all people will experience confidence as happiness, for sure, right?
Okay.
So confidence must fall somewhere under sort of happiness, but at the end of the day, it's the same sort of experience internally, which is, how can I think about whatever's happening in my life? How can I think about myself in a truthful but better or best feeling way? Kind of the work is always the same, right? So happiness is like, let me look out into the world, into my life, and let me focus on the best parts of it. And because there is no such thing as a perfect life, perfect condition, perfect anything. So in order to be happy, I need to focus on the happy aspects or parts of my life, often to the exclusion of the things that aren't very happy at all. If I try to be too circumspect, if I am always weighing pros and cons, if I'm always looking at the best and worst parts, I won't be very happy at all, usually. And if I am, I won't be happy for very long.
Okay.
Confidence is the same way. Confidence is looking for the best, but it just so happens that you're focusing primarily or exclusively on yourself. So with confidence, you're looking for the best within yourself to the exclusion of some things that aren't so great about you. And if you do it consistently enough, you wire your brain to do it automatically. So really, it's the same work. It's just a different angle at it, right? So if you can be confident, you can be happy as well. If you can be happy, you can be confident. There is overlap, but they're not identical, obviously.
Interesting. Do you find people attach happiness to certain outcomes? So like, I will be happy when
Yes.
I make X amount of money, or I will be happy when I lose X amount of weight, or things like that, or when something happens, that's when I will feel the joy and the happiness.
That's really poignant. That's the really only kind of happiness most people know. It's an if-then conditional kind of happiness. Also goes for the love, by the way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes
I'll love
sense.
myself or I'll love others only when they check my boxes. Unfortunately, that's not the kind of happiness I'm talking about. The kind of happiness that I talk about, that I want people to aspire to and realize, is the kind of happiness that you feel all day, every day, even if you're going through something tough. Like, in the background of your experience
Wow.
is still a feeling of peaceful aliveness. There's a recognition that, I wouldn't mind this going in a different direction, or I'd really very much love this going in a different direction, or this person behaving differently. But if I'm really paying attention, I can still feel this like bubbling brook of bliss inside me. I can still feel this peaceful aliveness right there underneath it all. And I can either dial in and tap in to this terrible thing that's happening that I can't control, or I can feel that peaceful aliveness for a little while, or even as I navigate that situation, right? So you're absolutely right. I mean, I often think about desire or goals or dreams. And one way to think about it is that a goal, dream, or desire for most people is just a commitment to be unhappy until they get what they want.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's problematic. One, because it affects your happiness. If you are only happy when you're able to check the box or get to the top of the mountain or finish your to-do list or get the promotion, you're going to spend most of your life miserable.
Well, you're right, because to succeed in so many different things all the time
Yes.
is obviously very difficult.
Absolutely.
So that's a great point.
Yeah.
So that journey of getting to whatever that thing is,
Yes.
right, is going to take a while.
Absolutely.
And you could very well be miserable that whole time. And I think a lot of people go through that. I mean, I think I've gone through that in my life. I mean, there's certain things that I've wanted to achieve, and once I achieved them, I did feel happy about it. But looking back, the journey was the best part. But most of us don't focus on that.
No. Well, see, that's where you're very rare. I mean, in so many ways, one of the many reasons you're rare and special. That takes incredible insight. A lot of self-awareness, and clearly, I don't know if you believe in past lives. Maybe it's not your first life,
Yeah.
for sure, but lots of wisdom in that. Most of us chase people, things, and places, and we're pretty stressed out and anxious and worried the entire time. We have these sparks or moments of joy or pleasure, but they're very intermittent, And I would say that, like a space or gap between two periods of unhappiness is not happiness. It's just preparation for more unhappiness.
Right. That's
Right?
very well said.
Yeah. So when you don't prioritize happiness here and now, you not only compromise your ability to experience a happy life, but you also compromise your ability to be successful. Yeah. Now, there is a caveat to this, which is
Okay.
extraordinarily unhappy people often become extraordinarily successful because that insecurity and that work, it drives them to accomplish and achieve something.
Well, let's
right?
let's hold on to that. So
Yeah.
let's dive into that a little bit more. So say that one more time, because I think that
Yes.
was really important what you said. That opens up a very good conversation.
Yeah.
So unhappy people.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a bell curve,
Yeah.
right? So for most people, the happier you get, the more successful you become. Now, if you're really, really happy, and you're just enjoying your life every day, what's the motivation to go make another $1 billion or another $10 million? You're already good.
Well,
You're
that's
enjoying your life.
content, isn't it? Isn't
We'll
that
call it
being content?
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. So what happens is a lot of folks, they are either deeply insecure or they're deeply unhappy, and so they chase success.
Yeah.
And then they find that none of it can really fill them up on the inside, so they keep chasing and getting more of it. It's like the client that you have that makes $10 million a month, and it's not enough. They need 20 million, and then when
Right.
they need 20, they need 30, and they kind of only want it because they don't have it, right? So lots of people become successful in that way. The only problem is that they're running on dirty energy, right? So that dirty energy pollutes their lives, their relationships. It certainly, compromises their happiness, and in the end, they often have a ton of regrets around it.
I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you want to be able to enjoy the journey and the destination. And it's a lot easier to do that if you prioritize, happiness from the beginning.
That makes a lot of sense. You use the term unconditional happiness. What are some, I guess, practical ways for those listening and viewing to kind of be able to achieve that?
Notice how often you've been wrong. Like, for me, that's super easy. Like, those are the times you've been wrong about what you thought would make you happy or unhappy. I mean, so many things in my life I was convinced were the worst thing ever. And then a few months, days, years later, I look back, wow, it's the best thing ever. The suicidal experience that I had is one of them. People will look at me and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, oh, I'm not sorry. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. Not the suicidal attempt exactly, but the experience of hitting rock bottom in a way, and then feeling the kind of peace and happiness and love that I felt. And then as a result of that, embarking on this journey to learn more deeply about happiness and to actually become happy and then teach it to others. Oh my gosh, that was a highlight of my life. And then there have been other things that have happened to me that have been mind-blowingly depressing and destructive, right? This is like, wow, what was I thinking? I was like chasing this relationship or this, project or this opportunity. And then in the end, you think that may be, so knowing that you've been wrong and knowing that noticing that you've been surrounded by happy conditions and circumstances, desirable ones, and yet you were still unhappy. Or just the opposite, you were surrounded by stress and anxiety or terrible conditions or a terrible diagnosis, and you felt complete peace.
Yeah.
So the truth is, your peace and happiness has never been truly conditional if you're paying attention, but your belief that it is, your belief that it depends on somebody or something else other than you, prevents you from accessing that happiness more consistently.
Interesting.
Right? So coming to a recognition that you're wrong about what you think leads to happiness, that it's not anything outside of you first, or in the world, or other people or other things, and then secondly, it's not in the future. We always postpone and procrastinate around happiness because we project into the future and we project it onto somebody or something else, and so that we're always chasing after the horizon. It's like you can't ever catch the horizon.
And that goes back to what we said. Then once you achieve that, then what, right?
Yes.
I would imagine, there have to be various degrees of happiness and unhappiness, right?
Yeah.
From a scale of 1 to 10, there's the one that's just very mild that maybe a lot of us just go through. Is that typical for most people to suffer, even if it's a mild degree of unhappiness or depression?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, yes, without question, most people will, we could even argue that to a large extent, life can feel like suffering.
Sure.
Right, to a large extent. But yeah, everyone suffers in some way, right? As long as you have a mind, and the mind is an incredible problem solver, but it's an equally good, if not better, troublemaker.
Sure.
You're going to find yourself suffering. And you often suffer things that you don't need to suffer. The argument is, Buddha would say, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Pain is like, I stubbed my toe. Pain is like, I'm sick. Pain is like, I lost someone I love. Suffering is like all the thoughts and commentary and judgment around that.
Sure.
Right? Without all that thinking, all that overthinking and over-analysis, you don't have to suffer. But most people don't realize that. So most of us suffer. So without question, whoever you've met has probably suffered a lot more deeply than you realize.
Interesting. And I would imagine we spend a lot of time in our head, right? So once we're suffering and we're worrying, right, which is a big part, we can compound that, right?
Yes.
To a point where a lot of times, I mean, I've experienced this myself, where I will worry about something for an extended period of time and it never happens.
Oh, Stefan. You know, Mark Twain, there was a great quote. I think it's Mark Twain. He said, I've suffered countless tragedies in my life, most of which have never happened.
Interesting.
Right.
I didn't know that, but I
Yeah.
could relate to that.
Yeah.
I think most of us do that. We worry about things and either it never happens or it's not nearly as bad as we expected.
You nailed it. I mean, life is so much sweeter than both our fantasies and our nightmares about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, the worst thing that can happen to you really in your life or on your deathbed is just a belief or just a thought. And Byron Katie's famous for saying that. And that's been my experience too. It's interesting because I remember one day in particular when this all landed with me deeply. I maybe got to the end of my to-do list that day, and I had enough money, and the job was okay, girlfriend was okay, everybody was okay. And I remember thinking, wait, I'm not worrying. And that worried me. That was
It worried
that was
you
the
that you
greatest
were not
worry.
worrying.
I'm missing something. I have to be missing something.
I could relate to that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when I began to really understand this, like, the brain is built for survival, not thriving necessarily.
Right.
It's not built for happiness necessarily. Now, if you survive, the likelihood of you being happy goes up a lot, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But yeah, so just understand the brain works like the century of a ship. Like, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
When all you have is a brain, or all you think you have is a brain, everything looks like a problem to be solved. Right? So as soon as you solve one problem or satisfy one desire, a new one pops up. It's like a game of whack-a-mole.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we all kind of do, and that's why folks don't tend to be happy more consistently or more deeply.
Interesting. So if we're worrying about not worrying, which I love that.
Yeah.
It sounds funny, but
Yeah.
it's actually really true.
Yeah.
Are we just sometimes spending too much time in our own head? I mean, is there like something overthinking things and just maybe we need to somehow let that go?
Stephen, this is why, I love you so much, brother. I mean, really, because that's the spoiler alert.
Yeah.
You know, that's precisely it. Like, it took me 20 years to really fully understand, integrate, and process it all. But the reason that I felt such peace and joy and love in that moment, that suicidal moment, was because my mind was finally quiet for a moment. In contemplating the end of my life, I came to the end of my problems, so I thought.
Right.
And now I'm at the end of thinking. And for just a few moments, a few micro moments, my mind was really quiet, and I could feel that peaceful aliveness, joy, or happiness that's always within. I call it the invincible summer of the invincible summer within, or the eternal sunshine of the spotless or thoughtless mind.
Okay. Okay.
Right?
I like
the
that.
idea is that there's always the sunshine behind the clouds. You just have to pay attention.
Wow. Okay. So I mentioned that there's various degrees and the lower ends. At what point does someone say, I need to see someone like Rob?
Yeah.
I need help. I'm too unhappy too often.
So it's such a profound question, Stephen, because when I first started my work in positive psychology and opened my private practice, I thought people would call me and say, hey, I'm unhappy. Can you help? That is rarely the case. Rarely. I mean, I could probably count on two hands in the 20 years the number of people who have done that. Most people call and say, my girlfriend sucks, my boyfriend sucks, I don't have a boyfriend, I don't have a girlfriend, my kids are a problem, my work is a problem, my boss is a problem, this health thing, all valid. Also, so that's how they come, and I meet them where they are. And what I secretly do is help them untangle that. For sure, people are difficult. Like, people are peoply. Kids are
Right.
kitty. Like, people, will, and the world itself is not designed to make you happy. That's something you have to do yourself, right? So, yes, they don't come for the reasons I thought they would in the beginning. They come from a place of more conditional happiness, and that's okay. It's a great place to start.
Okay. You once told me, and I don't know if I'm going to word it properly, but you once said that it's one thing to be depressed and want help, but you also have to be motivated to actually get help. I remember you telling me that, and I thought that was very profound.
I love that you say that, because that is that second point, which is that, yeah, when you're severely depressed, and something else I hadn't thought about when I was, starting out, when you're severely depressed, your motivation goes out the window, right? Depression is learned helplessness to a large extent, right? So Martin Seligman, the godfather of positive psychology, really, that's where he made his name, was around the work around learned helplessness and depression. So when you're, highly depressed or deeply depressed, you don't feel motivated to do things that you even previously enjoyed, let alone call a positive psychologist or call a happiness coach or call anyone to get help, because you just don't think it's worthwhile.
Sure.
And you don't have the energy, or it doesn't feel like you have the bandwidth to do so. So that's absolutely right, Stefan. That's the other reason that often folks that are in most need, I don't always hear from.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess the question then, Rob, and this is the $1,000,000 question, is how do we rewire our brain so that we can be happy or be less unhappy, right?
Yeah, practice.
Okay.
Practice. It's not complicated. It's actually quite simple. It's not always easy in the beginning, but I promise you it'll be easy in the end. So I think of it as sort of like 4 steps. The first step is what we'll call identifying happiness islands. These are activities that you love for their own sake. You just feel so alive when you're doing X, Y, or Z. Just make a list and try to do more of them. Very simple. In order to get there, you sometimes have to identify your happiness deserts. Those are activities you do not love for their own sake. You only like because they get you something else. Taxes is a good example, maybe. Right. So anything that you don't love, particularly things that you hate, you write down under your happiness deserts list, and you try to get those out of your life. And you can get them out of your life one of 7 ways. You can, first of all, just reduce or eliminate. Just because other people say you should do them doesn't mean that you should. There is no universe called should.
Yes.
Right? So you can reduce or eliminate. That's the cheapest and fastest. You can outsource or delegate. You can automate or regulate or innovate. But step 1 is spend more time enjoying happiness or happy activities.
Let's spend time in that for a second, because that's something I've actually done myself. I don't know if you know that. I don't know if we ever discussed that, did we? I've done that, where I've made a list of the things that I get joy and bliss from, right?
Yeah.
And it could be simple things. I mean, it doesn't mean I have to complete a marathon.
That's right.
It could just mean being by myself, having a coffee at my favorite coffee shop, and just having 15 minutes of peace, right? But you're right about the other part. And I don't know which one is equally more important, which one is more important. Eliminating things that you need out of your life, because we all have that as well. There are toxic things in our lives, toxic people sometimes as well, or there are just certain things that just for whatever reason we don't feel good about. And I've identified some of those and realized that I don't really need them in my life. So let's get rid of them. That doesn't create a perfect life, at least for me, but I believe that certainly helps a lot.
Gosh, I love that. You remind me of 2 great quotes that are relevant here. One is, your only problem is that you think you have time.
Okay.
Right? You don't have time to waste on things you don't enjoy. You don't have time to waste on things that aren't productive.
That life is too short.
Life is too short.
Yeah.
Right? The second quote I love, and that's Buddha. Second quote is, your only problem is that you think there are rules. Billy Bob Thornton. Okay.
That's a good one. Okay.
Yeah, these 2 make great bedmates, right? Yeah. So I love.
I don't think of them together.
No, exactly. That's why I like to bring them together. But that is precisely the point that you're speaking to, which is that there's lots of things in life that other people or society will tell you, even your boss will tell you that you need to do, or you must do, or you should do. You have to be vigilant about asking yourself if that's true for you. You need to have a big house.
Right.
Maybe for me, I don't like the idea of a big house. I don't want to maintain anything.
Yeah.
Right. We're talking about that. Like, other things. Maybe you need to do a lot of marketing or advertising or whatever. Maybe. But also, if it's not right for you, it's not right for you. And you don't want to spend your time doing things that you don't love. There are other ways to, skin that cat.
That's the delegate and automate.
Yes, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can find somebody else to do it. Believe it or not, the things you hate, somebody else probably loves.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So there's a difference, you say, between pleasure and fulfillment. And I think we went into this a little bit, but I guess, how do you actually design your life around that? I mean, what does that really look like?
Yeah. So you do want pleasure in your life. There's nothing wrong with pleasure. You just don't want it to be only pleasure. You also want meaning and purpose and passion, and so pleasure is great. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition.
Okay.
Right. And so I think of pleasure as just anything of the body. Really, it can be of the mind too. But you'll notice those things, while they are enjoyable while you're doing them, you can often feel empty afterwards. Sometimes you even get a hangover afterwards.
Okay.
So it's like drinking too much or partying too much. You can do anything, quite frankly, too much. But the pleasure alone does not equate to happiness. I say again, happiness is the peaceful aliveness that exists underneath between, above, below, all experiences, conditions, circumstances, sensations, perceptions, thoughts, and feelings. It's always there.
Okay.
So pleasure, you'll notice, is fleeting. It's fickle. Sometimes it's pleasurable, sometimes it's not. It's like the first slice of pizza was great. The 10th feels sick. You feel sick.
Right.
It's a good way to know.
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, pleasure is also very external. It requires somebody or something else in order to feel, right? Generally. So not always, but that's generally the case. So yes, pleasure is great. Definitely not against pleasure, but it's not happiness.
Interesting. Okay. So maybe tough for you to answer this one, but just in general, what does like a typical client look like for you? I mean, what is the type of person? Obviously, not giving us too much, but what does the type of client look like that comes to you?
It's a great question. I'd say they fall into probably 3 different categories. The first are like entertainers, athletes, or aspiring entertainers and athletes. That's like the one sort of population. The other population is sort of executives or entrepreneurs. Right. And then the third is sort of just like everyday people like me, right, that just want to experience more happiness or more success. And so they're kind of all over the board, quite frankly. Like when I started, I really just meant to do pure happiness kind of coaching. And then I realized that this happiness thing touches every different area and space of people's personal and professional lives, right? So for instance, so executives and entrepreneurs come to me, one, maybe to polish their strategic thinking, right? Or to enhance their executive presence.
Okay.
Or to enhance their emotional regulation, to reduce their stress and anxiety, to cultivate more positive communication styles, right? So it all sounds like it's different themes and topics, but the truth is, at the heart of it, it's the same work for me, because I'm helping them to reframe the way they think about this particular experience or person or themselves. And I'm wanting to do that in a truthful but positive or better feeling way.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So the idea there is I do pretty much the same work. We swap out a lot of the words, and it becomes just about semantics, really. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there are some nuances, but yeah, I'd say at the end of the day, most clients, believe it or not, whether they're super successful celebrities or everyday people, have essentially the same problems. It's just that some of them feel or seem a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Would you say one of those 3, the professional athletes, executives, and just regular people like us, would you say any of those categories you notice more unhappiness? Just out of curiosity. I know that's a very difficult question.
It's a great question. That's a phenomenal question. I think it's different flavors of unhappiness.
Okay.
So, for the folks that don't have enough money to realize it yet, the suffering they experience is around finances, right? Or around getting promotions and things of that nature. And they're suffering in that. And then taking care of the folks that are extraordinarily rich and successful might not be worried about that anymore, although a lot of them still are, believe it or not.
Right.
Now they've kind of come to the end of like, okay, this money thing and success thing isn't fulfilling me, and I don't know what to do. So theirs is a different kind. I love that part because they usually feel more ready to go deeper.
Sure.
But that's certainly not always true. So I'd say the flavor of it is different. But I think that most people still recognize that what they're feeling is unhappiness. It's just that there's a tendency for most of us to project it onto somebody or something else. It must be, my boss is an asshole. It must be.
Right.
I mean,
blame it on something.
Yeah.
Right.
But the problem is, as soon as the boss goes away or is replaced, then that unhappiness gets projected now onto their girlfriend or boyfriend or the stranger in the street. And then suddenly you realize, no, you think that this person or this place is hell, but you're carrying hell within you all the time.
Right.
And you're just projecting it onto everybody else or everything else. So that's usually both the challenge and the opportunity for me, is to help them realize that. They're like, hey, your boss wasn't at work today, but you still suffered. Why was that?
That's interesting. Yeah. So when you mentioned about eliminating certain things out of your life, I mean, like I mentioned, people. I mean, there may be someone toxic in my life that I could just eliminate, but I cannot get rid of my boss, right? So you make me think. So if someone is listening and that's one of the things that bother them, what can they do about that? And what are some of the things that you would suggest?
So number one, for me, people often ask, like, Rob, how did you get happy so fast after being so unhappy? And first of all, I'm like, it took way longer than it sounds like it did. It took a long time. But secondly, part of the reason that maybe I was able to accomplish it faster was because I only had one desire left in the world. I didn't want to live and be unhappy. And I don't care how much money I made. I didn't care how successful I was. I just wanted to be happy. I was willing to be like live on the beach if I had to be in order to be happy.
Right.
So that kind of single-minded focus is extraordinarily productive, right? So number one is you have to want happiness more than anything else. You really have to want it. Number two, you have to be willing just to do the work for it, right? So I think that was part of it too, is like I wanted to be happy and happy only, but I also wanted to be happy like a drowning person wants air.
Okay. Right.
Like that, right. So remind me, refresh my memory on the question because I got a little.
Yeah. So I mean, just in general, but like eliminating people, right?
Yes.
So if I go to work every day and I have a boss or I have a coworker, right, that I just have a hard time. I mean, how really do I deal with them? Because I cannot get rid of them.
So, okay, a couple tips here. Number one is try not to make your pain more painful.
Okay.
Right. So if they're there and they're berating you or whatever it is that they're doing, try to let it just exist in that moment. In the next moment, try to move on to that moment. Right.
Okay.
So presence.
Yeah.
Right. That's number one. Is like try not to relive and pre-live your suffering.
Okay.
Huge cheat code in life. Right. If the movie sucked, you saw it once. Don't go see it again.
Don't go see it again.
Don't go see it again.
Or don't
okay?
recommend it to anyone.
Don't recommend it to anyone.
Yeah.
It's fine. If you have to process a little bit with your therapist, fine. But that's it. Okay. So number one, don't pre-live and relive bad times.
Okay.
Second of all, when you're in the experience, don't give all of your attention to the other person. Keep part of your attention inside. So inside of us, we can feel on a scale from 0 to 10, 0 being perfectly at peace, 10 being super stressed out, about to jump kind of thing. You can feel where you are. If you are at a 4 or 5, you're okay. Start to get a 5 or 6. That's the time to intervene on your own behalf. Take a break, go for a walk, make up any excuse you need to get away from this trigger for a little while.
Okay, take a little break.
Yes, okay. When you're around a 7 or 8, it's almost too late, okay? The train has left the station, and you're not going to get,
Right.
So that's okay, but you just want to keep part of your attention inside, especially in moments when you think you'll be triggered. And you want to keep it inside, in that place within you where you feel peacefully alive.
Okay.
Where you feel peaceful aliveness. That's critical. So I try never to give all of my attention to anyone else. I keep part of it inside so that I'm still at peace when I'm having that conversation. That is contagious. One, you don't become triggered as easily, so you're not as defensive or reactive. Second, because you're so at peace, that starts to infect the other person, right? So they can't bother you. It's like a bully keeps picking on you. You're kind of like unfazed by it, right?
Sure.
So that's number 2, maybe 2 and 3. The other thing is you want to learn how to be a lot more artful and skillful in communication, right? Just because somebody asks you a question or just because somebody makes a statement, it doesn't mean that you have to respond to the question or the statement.
Right.
I mean, there are no rules here. I mean, if you want to go off on a tangent, go off on a tangent. If you want to say nothing at all, you can say nothing at all. But learning to be a lot more creative in conversation and learning not to abide by the rules that the bully is imposing upon you. Right. So you can watch TV for great characters that do that. Like, I love The Blacklist.
Right.
Like, Raymond Reddington's character is fantastic at that. Right. So becoming more artful and skillful in positive communication. The other part of it is like when you do respond, can you disagree without being disagreeable? Like, try to model for the other person.
Sure.
What or how you want them to communicate with you.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
That being said, don't also expect the person to get any of it.
Right. They may not.
Yeah.
Right.
So the final thing I'll say is just keep interactions as short and sweet as possible. Get in and get out. If it's a 30-minute meeting and you guys are done in 5 minutes, all right, thanks so much. If you need anything, let me know.
And move on.
Move on.
Okay. Thank you for that. Is there any merit to faking happiness? So in other words, and you know what I mean already, but if I just kind of walk around every day and try to remind myself all day to be happy, I mean, does that work? Or am I going to eventually just revert right back to the way I am?
Yes, and here's why it often works. So if you feel like it's a real snow job, often it doesn't.
Right.
And yet it still can. And the reason it can is that, first of all, even when you're just smiling, that causes things to happen in your brain and your body that improves your subjective well-being. It makes you feel better. Just smiling, even if it's fake.
Right. Okay.
Starts to, no, You want to try to make it genuine, though. Okay. The second reason it works is because of something called behavioral confirmation, so and emotional contagion. So when people feel that you're in a good mood, it tends to rub off on them, and suddenly they treat you such. If you look like you're in a bad mood or you're not doing too good and you look unhappy, people tend to stay away. Or if they do interact with you, they expect you to be reactive or defensive or to be nasty. And so they will get ahead of you without even knowing it. It's all unconscious often.
Right.
Right. So when you fake it, you feel better because of the biochemistry in your body. But secondly, because of the emotional contagion part and the behavioral confirmation part, other people begin to mirror that back to you. That then reinforces this idea that you're actually probably in a better mood than you were before or whatever. So yes, actually it can and it does. Now, as a long-term strategy, not the best.
Okay.
Right? Because you don't want that to be your only strategy or your top go-to strategy. You really need to do the inner work. So that actually brings us to the other 3 steps.
Yeah. And I was thinking of that because you and I are both into fitness. Is practicing happiness like fitness, right? If you do it enough, is it like a muscle that it will just continue to grow?
Absolutely. So science says if you practice happiness, we'll call them happiness activities, for 22 to 66 days, so about a month or 2, you rewire your brain to do it
because you develop a habit.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
It's an actual, and the brain is what we call plastic, right? So that's what neuroplasticity is all about. So part of happiness is genetic. 50% of it, in fact, is genetic.
50% of happiness is genetic.
Yes, 50% is genetic.
So 50% of unhappiness is also genetic.
That's right. So we're all wired a little higher or lower for happiness from the beginning. Now, that being said, that genetic coding for happiness, it's not hardwired the way, let's say, height is or eye color is. You can't really change those things so easily. But you can change your happiness set point by practicing like voluntary activities. So some of the things we're talking about today, you practice those things. Through epigenetics, you can actually turn on and off that coding, right? So you can actually make yourself happier and set your baseline higher, and it will stay at a higher level, right?
Okay.
Unlike height and eye color.
Right.
So 50% is genetic. 40% is what we'd call voluntary activities, what we're talking about here today, like how you can actually change it. 10% is actually conditions and circumstances of your life. So if you think about it, most people spend most of their life chasing that 10% bump they hope to get from conditions and circumstances. But if you prioritize happiness, then you not only change the 50% to genetic, so that goes up, you also you're working on the 40%, so you're 40% more control, so that's 90% already. And because we know that happiness increases the likelihood of success, you also then influence and inform those conditions and circumstances that you want to be successful.
Okay.
Right? So that's why I argue happiness is 100% under your control, right? But worst case, we can say, even scientists will say, even the most conservative scientists will say 90% for sure.
Wow. That was pretty powerful. I did not know that 50%. Amazing.
It's
Rob,
wild, right? Yeah.
It really is. Rob, we could go on and on
Yes,
for
for
long.
sure.
This is amazing. So let me ask you, so anyone listening right now, I mean, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? If there's someone out there saying, I love what I hear, I need someone to talk to, right?
Yeah.
How can they get in touch with you?
You can find me at my website at coachrobmack.com. You can find me on most social media platforms, probably most consistently Instagram at Rob Mack Official. And you can find both my published books, Happiness from the Inside Out, Love from the Inside Out, everywhere great books are sold, including Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Love that. Listen, this was great. Not only appreciate you sharing your story, but all this insight, and hopefully we helped someone here today. And if we didn't, hopefully they reach out to you and get help. But I appreciate our friendship. I appreciate you doing this. This was absolutely terrific.
I have so much love for you, Stefan, and I mean that. You are so great at what you do, and you are literally the same person, like on camera and on air, as you are off camera and off air, and that is a huge testament and compliment to who you are. So thank you so much for inviting me into the conversation, and even more so for being a friend.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Thanks.